Picture this: the sun has set over Rome. The grand public sundials, which have governed the day's business, are now just silent, dark slabs of stone. But the city does not sleep. In the halls of justice, lawyers are still pleading their cases. In military camps, sentries are changing their guard with precise regularity. Across the sprawling empire, a complex society continues to function seamlessly through the night. How the Romans had conquered the day with shadow and angle, but to master the night, they turned to a far more versatile and ingenious technology: flowing water. This is the story of the clepsydrae, the Roman water clock, and it is a story that challenges our very assumptions about ancient innovation. We often imagine the past as a simpler time, but the reality of Roman engineering was anything but simple. This was a civilization that built aqueducts that marched for miles and concrete that could set underwater, so it should be no surprise that their approach to measuring time was equally brilliant and sophisticated. The water clock was not a mere curiosity, it was a vital piece of technological infrastructure, a hydraulic engine that helped power the legal, military, and social machinery of the ancient world. It was a device of astonishing complexity hidden behind a deceptively simple principle, and its influence reached into the most unexpected corners of Roman life. Today we are going on a journey to unravel the secrets of this forgotten marvel. We will step inside the workshop of an ancient engineer to understand the precise mechanics that made it tick. We will stand in a Roman courtroom and see how the flow of water could decide the fate of a man on trial. We will explore how this technology supported the vast, coordinated efforts of the Roman legions. This is more than a history lesson. It is a rediscovery of a lost world of ingenuity. By the end of our exploration, you will see the ancient Romans not as figures in togas staring at sundials, but as master engineers who solved one of humanity's oldest problems with a creativity that would not be surpassed for centuries. So let's leave our modern watches and digital displays behind and immerse ourselves in the captivating world of the clepsydrae, where time itself was measured by the steady, relentless drip of water. But the genius of the Roman clepsydrae was not in its basic form, but in how they transformed this simple principle into a reliable and sophisticated instrument. The fundamental challenge with any water clock is that the flow of water is not constant. As the water level in the upper reservoir drops, the water pressure decreases, which in turn slows the rate of the drip. A simple two-vessel clock would start accurately but become slower and slower as the day wore on, making it useless for the precise needs of Roman law or military discipline. So how did Roman engineers solve this problem? They introduced a third crucial component, an overflow tank. The upper reservoir was not fed by a simple tap. Instead, it was constantly supplied by a steady stream of water from an aqueduct or an elevated tank. The key was that this incoming flow was slightly greater than the outflow through the timing nozzle. This meant the upper reservoir always had a small amount of water spilling over an overflow channel, maintaining a constant water level. With a constant water level came constant water pressure, and with constant pressure, the drip from the timing nozzle became a reliable, steady trickle. This was the masterstroke of Roman hydraulic engineering. They created a self-regulating system, a feedback loop made of water and stone that ensured the flow remained uniform hour after hour. The lower collecting vessel could now be marked with a truly linear scale, where the distance between marks represented equal units of time. This transformed the clepsydrae from a crude timer into a genuine clock, capable of measuring the passing hours with a consistency that sundials could never achieve. This innovation meant that for the first time in history, a city could run on a single objective measure of time, regardless of clouds, nightfall, or the changing seasons. Yet acknowledging this debt to the Greeks is only the first step in understanding the Roman achievement, because the Romans were never merely copyists. They were master adapters, taking a promising concept and refining it with a characteristically practical, systematic, and scalable approach to engineering. While a Greek clepsydrae might have been a clever apparatus for a philosopher to time speeches in an assembly, the Roman version was a piece of civic infrastructure, built to perform reliably day in and day out in the demanding environments of a bustling forum or a sprawling military camp. The primary weakness of the simpler Greek design was its inherent inaccuracy. It functioned like a kitchen timer. As the water level in the upper vessel dropped, The decreasing water pressure caused the flow through the outlet to slow down. A speech time for the first hour of the day would be significantly shorter than one time for the 10th hour if measured by the same clock. For a civilization built on law and order, such inconsistency was unacceptable. A legal argument could not be cut short or granted extra time based on the whims of a dwindling water supply. This need for unwavering reliability is what drove the Roman breakthrough, the constant level reservoir. Imagine the upper vessel not as a simple container that empties, but as a basin that is constantly being refilled from an external source, like a small aqueduct channel or an elevated tank. The engineers calibrated the system so that the rate of water flowing into this basin was ever so slightly greater than the rate flowing out through the timing nozzle. This ingenious setup meant that the basin always remained full to the brim, with the excess water spilling over a carefully placed weir or into an overflow channel. By maintaining a constant head of water, they guaranteed a constant pressure and thus a perfectly steady, unwavering trickle from the outlet. This transformed the entire device from a crude timer into a precision instrument. The scale on the lower measuring vessel could now be linear and trustworthy, with each mark representing an equal portion of an hour. This was hydraulic regulation at its finest, a self-correcting system that required no human intervention beyond its initial setup. The second critical improvement lay in the outlet itself. A simple hole drilled in stone or pottery would wear down over time, its edges eroding and changing the flow rate. Roman engineers addressed this with meticulous precision, crafting the all-important nozzle or pipette from durable, corrosion-resistant materials like bronze or even lead. They carefully bored a narrow, consistent aperture, ensuring its diameter was perfectly uniform along its entire length. This attention to the smallest detail minimized turbulence and variations in flow, making the drips as regular as a mechanical metronome. The contrast between the two civilizations becomes clear when you compare their objectives. The Greek model was often a demonstration of a principle, a tool for specific, limited tasks. The Roman design was engineered for endurance and public trust. It was built to be a cornerstone of daily life, enabling a complex society to coordinate its activities with a shared objective standard of time, independent of the sun's position or the season of the year. This relentless drive to improve, to make technology more robust and more functional, is a hallmark of Roman engineering genius. They saw a good idea and asked not just how it worked, but how it could work better, longer, and for more people. This meticulous engineering, with its constant level reservoir and precisely crafted nozzles, provided the stable foundation for the clock. But the true heart of the device, the component that gave Roman engineers direct control over the flow of time itself, was the regulator mechanism, known as the moderator. Think of this as the clock's internal brain. While the reservoir ensured a steady water pressure, the moderator was the adjustable valve that determined exactly how much of that steady flow was allowed to pass into the measuring vessel. It transformed the clock from a fixed-rate timer into a customizable instrument. The simplest form of regulator was a tapered wooden or bronze plug. By inserting this plug into the outlet pipe, an attendant could finally adjust the size of the opening. A slight twist one way would narrow the gap, slowing the drip to a crawl. A twist back would widen it, allowing the water to flow more freely. This was a brilliantly straightforward solution, but Roman horologists, the masters of timekeeping, developed even more sophisticated versions. Some clocks featured a rotary valve, a small disc of metal or hard stone with a series of different sized holes drilled into it. This disc would be mounted just behind the main outlet. By rotating the disc, the attendant could align a specific hole, a large one for the long summer days, a smaller one for the short winter days, with the main water channel. This was effectively an ancient hydraulic version of changing the settings on a modern device, but the true mark of Roman genius was their understanding that their medium, water, was not a constant. They realized that water's thickness, its viscosity, changes with temperature. On a cold winter morning, water flows more sluggishly than on a hot afternoon in July. If the regulator was set for a summer flow rate, the clock would run slow in the winter and vice versa. To achieve true year-round accuracy, the clock's keeper had to become a calibrator. He would have a set of charts or engraved plates, likely based on centuries of observation, that told him which regulator setting to use for different times of the year. This wasn't a set-it-and-forget-it machine. It required skilled operation and a deep, almost intuitive understanding of natural principles. This extraordinary attention to detail, this willingness to account for even the most subtle environmental variables, is what elevated the Roman water clock from a mere gadget to a serious scientific instrument. It was this combination of robust engineering and nuanced calibration that allowed the clepsydrae to earn the trust of judges, generals, and citizens, becoming the authoritative timepiece for the most critical functions of the state. With the water flowing at a perfectly regulated pace, the next great challenge for Roman engineers was creating a clear and immediate way to display the passing hours. After all, a clock is only useful if you can read it easily. While a simple clepsydrae might have required someone to peer into the measuring vessel to see a water level against a marked scale, the most advanced Roman water clocks featured a far more elegant and ingenious solution: an automated display system. This transformed the clock from a scientific instrument into a public utility, allowing anyone to glance up and know the time without needing to understand its complex hydraulic internals. The key to this transformation was a simple yet brilliant device: the float, typically a piece of cork or a carefully crafted hollow ball of bronze. This float was placed inside the lower collecting vessel. As water steadily trickled in, the float would rise, its vertical movement directly mirroring the accumulation of time. This linear upward motion was the raw data output of the clock. But to make it useful, this data needed a visual translation. The real stroke of genius was connecting this rising float to a pointer on a dial. This was achieved through a remarkably sophisticated piece of mechanical engineering for its time: a rack and pinion gear system. Imagine a vertical rack, a long tooth strip attached directly to the float. As the float in the rack rose, the teeth engaged a small, round pinion gear. The linear motion of the rack was thereby converted into the rotary motion of the pinion gear. This rotating pinion gear was then connected to an axle that passed through the face of the clock, and on the other side of that face was the clock's hand or pointer. So as water filled the vessel, the float rose, turning the gears, which in turn swept the pointer across a calibrated dial. This dial was often marked with the 12 Roman hours of the day, creating a time-telling experience that feels strikingly familiar to us today. This was nothing short of a mechanical revolution. It meant that a senator arguing in the forum, a merchant in the marketplace, or a centurion in a distant fort could tell the time with a simple glance, just as we look at a watch face. The complex interplay of hydraulics and mechanics was hidden from view, presenting only a clean, easily interpreted result. This innovation moved timekeeping out of the realm of specialized knowledge and into the public sphere, making standardized time a visible and accessible part of daily Roman life. It was a crucial step in the democratization of time, allowing an entire society to synchronize its activities to a single objective rhythm. All of this intricate technology, the constant level reservoirs, the precisely calibrated regulators, the mechanical displays, culminated in structures of truly imperial scale. While our journey so far has focused on the mechanics of individual clocks, the Roman ambition extended far beyond standalone devices in a courtroom or military camp. Their ultimate expression of timekeeping power was the monumental public clock, and the most legendary of them all was the Horologium of Augustus. To understand this wonder, we must first picture the Campus Martius, the Field of Mars, a vast floodplain on the outskirts of the ancient city that was transformed by Augustus into a grand complex celebrating his reign and the new world order he had established. At its heart stood a magnificent Egyptian obelisk, a towering spike of red granite that soared over 100 feet into the Roman sky. This obelisk, brought from Heliopolis as a symbol of Augustus's conquest of Egypt following his victory over Cleopatra and Mark Antony, served as the gnomon, the pointer, of an enormous sundial. The shadow of this obelisk fell upon a vast marble pavement, a gigantic dial face inlaid with a grid of gilt bronze lines marking the hours, days, and signs of the zodiac. This was the horologium in its primary form, a sundial on a scale befitting an emperor, but a sundial, no matter how grand, is useless at night and on overcast days. This is where the water clock technology we've just explored became essential. Historical accounts and meticulous archaeological analysis strongly suggest that the horologium was not just a sundial. It was almost certainly paired with a massive, complex water clock system, a hydraulic marvel hidden within a nearby building or beneath the pavement itself. This clepsydrae would have taken over the timekeeping duties when the sun failed, ensuring that the official time of Rome never stopped flowing. Imagine the engineering feat: a constant water supply, likely fed by the Virgo aqueduct, would have powered a clock large enough and accurate enough to calibrate with the solar time indicated by the obelisk. The display for this water clock might have been just as public and grand, perhaps a large, visible dial with a pointer mechanically driven by a float, allowing any citizen in the forum to see the time day or night. The Horologium was far more than a practical timepiece. It was a profound political statement. By bringing order to time itself, Augustus was symbolically bringing order to the Roman world after decades of civil war. The clock synchronized not just the hours of the day, but the very rhythm of public life. Appointments at the baths, the opening of the law courts, the start of public games, all could be coordinated to this single authoritative standard. The message was clear. Under Augustus, time was no longer a chaotic, subjective experience. It was a disciplined, orderly resource managed by the emperor for the benefit of the empire. It positioned Augustus as the master of time, a ruler whose power extended even over the fundamental forces of nature. This monumental clock became the central timekeeping reference for the entire city, a physical embodiment of Roman engineering genius and imperial authority that dominated the cityscape and daily life for centuries. This drive for public spectacle and mechanical wonder reached its zenith in water clocks that were designed not just to inform, but to dazzle. Beyond the utilitarian timekeepers in law courts and military posts, Roman engineers created horological masterpieces that were pure theater, blending precise time measurement with automated displays that must have seemed like magic to the ancient citizen. The architect Vitruvius provides our clearest window into this world of mechanical marvels, describing clocks adorned with figures that moved on their own. Imagine approaching such a clock and seeing, on the hour, a small bronze bird suddenly whir into view, its mechanism producing a whistling chirp before retreating. Or picture a miniature soldier, powered by the clock's own heartbeat, raising his hammer to strike a bell, announcing the time with a clear, resonant chime. The secret behind these automata lay in a clever adaptation of the clock's core mechanics. While the primary float in the measuring vessel was connected to the time-telling hand, engineers designed secondary systems specifically for triggering these spectacular events. One common method used a small water wheel placed in the path of the outflow from the timing nozzle. As each drop of water fell, it would turn the wheel an infinitesimal amount. After a precisely calculated number of drops, say 360 for 1 hour, the wheel would complete a full rotation. This rotation could then engage a cam or a lever that released a counterweight or a spring, setting the automated figure into motion for a brief, wondrous performance. Another ingenious method involved a secondary, smaller float within the main measuring vessel. This float would be precisely weighted so that it would remain submerged until the water level reached a specific height, marking a particular hour. At that critical moment, the float's buoyancy would overcome its weight, causing it to rise suddenly. This rapid upward movement would pull a string or rod connected to a series of levers, activating the automated scene. This was programmable entertainment, engineered into the very fabric of timekeeping. But perhaps the most sophisticated feature of these advanced clocks was a component known as the anti-catergos. This was a special type of siphon, an inverted U-shaped tube designed not for filling but for emptying. Its purpose was to act as an automatic reset mechanism. As the water level in the measuring vessel rose throughout the day, it would eventually reach the top of this siphon tube. The moment the water crests the apex of the U-bend, the siphon effect kicks in, and the entire contents of the vessel are rapidly and forcefully drained back into a sump or a lower reservoir. This sudden reset would cause the main flow to drop, pulling the clock's hand back to its starting position, ready to begin the cycle anew with the next sunrise. This automation meant the clock could, in theory, run for days without an attendant needing to manually empty it. The anti-catergos was a brilliant piece of hydraulic engineering, a self-regulating system that ensured the clock's own operation would not lead to its failure. These spectacle clocks reveal a crucial, often overlooked dimension of Roman engineering, the desire to inspire awe. They were not content with mere functionality. A clock that simply told the time was useful, but a clock that sang like a bird or marched little soldiers was a testament to the power and ingenuity of Rome itself. It demonstrated a mastery over nature so complete that even the abstract, relentless flow of time could be harnessed to create delight and wonder. This fusion of rigorous practicality and breathtaking theater is a signature of Roman technological achievement, showing a civilization that valued both disciplined order and the profound power of amazement. Yet for all their mechanical brilliance, the Roman water clock faced a profound and fundamental challenge that we, with our standardized 24-hour day, can easily overlook. The very definition of an hour in ancient Rome was not a fixed unit of time. Their system was based on the natural division of daylight. From sunrise to sunset, the period of light was always split into 12 equal portions, which they called hours. The same was done for the night from sunset to sunrise. This sounds logical, but it creates an extraordinary complication. The length of these seasonal hours changes every single day. On a long summer day near the solstice, a daylight hour could stretch to around 75 of our modern minutes. On a short winter day, that same daylight hour might compress to just 45 minutes. And the nighttime hours would be exactly the opposite, long in winter, short in summer. This meant a Roman water clock couldn't simply measure 60-minute increments. It had to be a dynamic instrument, capable of adapting its measurement to the shifting proportions of the day throughout the year. This requirement pushed Roman horology from mere engineering into the realm of applied astronomy and sophisticated mathematics. You couldn't just build a clock and be done with it. You had to build a clock that knew the seasons. So how did the Romans solve this? They developed two primary ingenious solutions, each a testament to their practical genius. The first and more straightforward method relied on the skill of the clock's operator. Instead of a single permanent scale inside the measuring vessel, the clockkeeper would have a set of different bronze or marble strips, each engraved with a scale calibrated for a specific month or season. At the beginning of each month, or perhaps at the change of a season, the attendant would open the clock, remove the scale for the outgoing period, and carefully insert the new, correct one. The clock's steady, regulated flow remained constant, but the meaning of the water level changed. Where the water might have reached the mark for the third hour on a scale for December, that same water level would only indicate the second hour on the scale for June. This was a brilliantly pragmatic approach. It required no alteration to the clock's complex hydraulic system. It simply changed the interpretation of its output. It turned the water clock into a programmable device through physical media. Its accuracy depended on the keeper's diligent observance of the calendar. The second solution, however, was far more elegant and automated, showcasing a truly advanced understanding of geometry. Rather than changing the scale, Roman engineers changed the shape of the measuring vessel itself. Instead of a simple cylinder where the water level rises at a constant linear rate, they crafted receiving vessels that were carefully shaped, often like a cone or a curved amphora. The wideness of the vessel at any given height was calculated with precise intention. Imagine a vessel that is very narrow at the bottom and widens significantly as it goes up. In the early hours of the day, when the water level is low in this conical vessel, each fixed volume of water added causes the level to rise a great deal. But as the vessel fills and the circumference expands, each additional portion of water makes the level rise by a smaller amount. Roman mathematicians and astronomers could design these vessels so that this non-linear rate of rise perfectly compensated for the changing length of the seasonal hour. On a short winter day when an hour is brief, the water level would jump up quickly at the start. On a long summer day when an hour is long, the water would rise more slowly in the wider upper part of the vessel. In both cases, the distance between the hour marks on the vessel's scale could be evenly spaced, because the changing shape of the container did all the complicated mathematical work. This was a masterpiece of integrated design where the physical form of the clock embodied a deep cosmic principle. It meant that the clock, once set in motion, automatically told the correct seasonal time without any need for human adjustment. This approach reveals a level of abstract thinking that we rarely attribute to the ancient world. It shows that Roman engineers weren't just tinkerers. They were applied scientists who could translate the predictable patterns of the solar year into a tangible, mechanical reality. This constant, silent adjustment for the seasons made the Roman water clock one of the most sophisticated and context-aware timekeeping devices ever created before the mechanical clock. But the relentless drip of water and the delicate dance of gears would have been for nothing if the clock itself was not built to last. The true test of Roman engineering lay not just in the brilliance of its design, but in the durability of its construction. A water clock was a machine in constant contact with its most destructive enemy, water itself. Corrosion, mineral buildup, and biological growth could quickly choke the precise nozzles and foul the intricate mechanisms, rendering the most sophisticated design useless. To combat this, Roman craftsmen turned to a carefully chosen arsenal of materials, each selected for its specific properties and the role it played in the clock's long-term survival. For more modest public clocks or private household versions, the humble and readily available material was terracotta. Molded and fired clay was inexpensive and could be formed into the necessary basins and pipes. But its porous nature made it susceptible to cracking and frost and prone to algae and slime buildup, which would slowly but surely alter the flow rate. For any clock that needed to be a reliable civic instrument, something far more robust was required. This is where the metalworkers took over. Bronze was the undisputed champion for the most critical components. An alloy of copper and tin, bronze was strong, resistant to corrosion, and could be cast or hammered into incredibly precise shapes. The all-important moderator valve, the gears of the display mechanism, and the outlet nozzles were almost certainly fashioned from bronze. Its hardness meant that the edges of a tiny aperture would not wear down easily, preserving the clock's accuracy for years. For pipes and reservoirs that needed to be watertight, lead was a common choice. While we now understand its toxicity, the Romans prized lead for its malleability. It could be easily bent and soldered to create complex, leak-proof plumbing systems within the clock's casing. And for the most extravagant timepieces, those commissioned by emperors or wealthy patricians as displays of opulence, the materials could border on the spectacular. Some accounts mention internal components plated with silver or even gold, not for any practical benefit, but as a breathtaking declaration of wealth. A golden float rising in a silver vessel was a statement that said its owner commanded not just time, but luxury itself. The craftsmanship involved was extraordinary. A metalworker would have to solder joints with such precision that not a single drop would seep through under constant pressure. The gears of the display mechanism had to be filed by hand to mesh perfectly, ensuring the pointer moved smoothly without jerking or sticking. The dials themselves were often works of art, beautifully engraved with Roman numerals and sometimes intricate patterns or mythological scenes. This was not mass production. Each clock was a bespoke piece of engineering, built by artisans who understood that the margin for error was vanishingly small. The choice of material was a direct response to the environment. In a world without chemical treatments, using naturally corrosion-resistant metals like bronze was the only way to ensure the clock's internal anatomy remained pristine. By building these mechanisms to withstand the relentless flow of water, Roman craftsmen ensured that the steady pulse of measured time could beat on, season after season, making each water clock not just a technological marvel, but a testament to the skill and foresight of the people who built it. For all its ingenuity, the magnificent Roman water clock was not a self-sufficient machine you could simply set and forget. Beyond the bronze gears and precisely carved nozzles lay a world of demanding, messy, and constant practical labor. Owning a clepsydrae, especially a public one, meant committing to a rigorous regimen of maintenance, because the very substance that gave it life, water, was also its greatest source of vulnerability. The first and most persistent challenge was water quality. While the grand aqueducts of Rome were engineering marvels, the water they carried was far from pure. It was often clouded with fine sediment, silt, and organic matter. Imagine these microscopic particles flowing into the clock's intricate plumbing. Over just a few days, they would begin to accumulate, slowly building up a layer of sludge inside the pipes. This was more than just a cleanliness issue. It was a direct threat to the clock's accuracy. Even a tiny, almost invisible coating of silt inside the narrow timing nozzle could significantly alter its diameter, changing the flow rate and causing the clock to run fast or slow. In the measuring vessel, algae and bacteria would find a perfect home in the stagnant water, creating a slimy biofilm that could foul the float mechanism and make the scale markings difficult to read. To prevent this, the entire system required frequent and thorough flushing. An attendant would have to drain the reservoirs and pipes, then scrub them clean with brushes, ensuring no contaminant was left to compromise the machine's delicate calibration. This was a tedious but vital chore, a battle against entropy fought with bristles and rags, and then there was the elemental threat of winter. In the colder provinces of the empire, like Britannia or Germania, a water clock faced a catastrophic risk: freezing. When the temperature dropped, the water inside the device would turn to ice, expanding with tremendous force. This expansion could easily crack terracotta vessels, split lead pipes, and deform bronze components, rendering the entire clock a useless, frozen sculpture. Solutions were limited and imperfect. For smaller, wealthy households, a slave might be tasked with moving the clock indoors to a heated room overnight. For larger public clocks, this was impossible. The only defense was to drain the system completely at the end of each day, a labor-intensive process of opening valves and mopping out basins, only to refill it all again at sunrise. This constant cycle of filling and emptying added another layer of complexity to the timekeeper's duties. The responsibility for all this demanding work fell to a dedicated individual, almost always a slave or a servant. This person was far more than a mere caretaker. They were the clock's mechanic, its calibrator, and its living memory. Their day began before anyone else's, ensuring the clock was cleaned, filled, and the correct seasonal scale was installed. Throughout the day, they would monitor the water level in the constant level reservoir, watching for any change in the overflow that might indicate a blockage. They would listen to the rhythm of the drips, their ear trained to detect any irregularity that signaled a problem. They possessed a deep, intuitive understanding of the machine's personality, knowing, for instance, that on particularly humid days, the flow might behave slightly differently. This human element is a crucial, often overlooked part of the story. The Roman water clock was not an autonomous piece of artificial intelligence. It was a partnership between brilliant engineering and skilled, conscientious human operation. The accuracy of a legal proceeding or the synchronization of a military maneuver ultimately rested on the diligence of this unnamed individual. Their daily, unglamorous labor, the scrubbing, the filling, the careful observation, was the indispensable ingredient that transformed an exquisite hydraulic sculpture into a reliable instrument of civic order. It's a powerful reminder that behind every great ancient technology, there was a person ensuring it kept ticking. Nowhere was the steady, impartial rhythm of the clepsydrae more critical than within the halls of Roman justice. Here, the abstract flow of time became a tangible resource, meticulously measured and fiercely contested. The law courts were theaters of high-stakes oratory, where fortunes, reputations, and even lives hung in the balance. To prevent these proceedings from descending into interminable marathons of speech-making, the Romans turned to technology as an arbiter of fairness. The clepsydrae was brought into the courtroom not as a mere convenience, but as an official instrument of the court, its operation overseen by a designated court clerk. The rules were precise and dramatic. The moment an advocate like Cicero rose to present his case, the command would be given, a plug would be removed or a valve opened, and the water would begin its fateful trickle into the measuring vessel. But the clock was not always running. This was the true sophistication of the system. The clepsydrae was a stop clock. If an opposing lawyer stood to raise an objection, the flow was halted. If a witness was called to give testimony, or if a document needed to be read aloud to the court, the water was stopped. The clock only measured the time. A single speaker actually held the floor, ensuring that each side received an equal and undiluted opportunity to persuade the judge and the jury. This practice, known as aquam dare to grant water, transformed time into a currency allocated by the court, making the clepsydrae's attendant one of the most powerful, if inconspicuous, figures in the room. The lawyer had to be a master not only of rhetoric and law, but also of time management, structuring his argument to fit within the allotted measure, building his crescendo before the final drop fell. We get our most vivid picture of this high-pressure environment from the writings of Marcus Tullius Cicero himself, whose legal battles were as much about timing as they were about truth. In his fiery speeches, Cicero often reveals his constant, simmering frustration with the water clock. He wasn't just arguing against his legal opponent, he was fighting the relentless flow of water. In his defense of Gaius Rabirius, a man accused of treason, Cicero explicitly complains about the brevity of the time granted to him for such a serious charge. He laments that the water is flowing away, carrying his chance at a full defense with it. This wasn't mere theatricality, it was a strategic move. By drawing the jury's attention to the limited time, Cicero was framing himself as the underdog, a champion of justice being stifled by procedural constraints. He was masterful at using the clock to his advantage. In another case, he might begin with a flurry of points to establish his core argument quickly, knowing that interruptions from his opponent could eat into his precious minutes. He had to anticipate objections and weave his responses into the fabric of his main speech, all while keeping one eye on the water level steadily rising in the vessel. The clock created a unique form of legal suspense. For the audience and the jury, the visual and auditory cue of the dripping water added a layer of tension, a constant reminder that the opportunity for persuasion was finite. A lawyer who rambled or repeated himself was literally wasting his client's most valuable asset. This system forced a discipline and efficiency in Roman legal oratory that might otherwise have been lost in long-winded digressions. It institutionalized a form of equality, at least in principle. Whether you were a famed senator like Cicero or a lesser-known advocate, the water measured out your opportunity without favor. This application of the clepsydrae demonstrates a profound Roman belief that technology could be a tool for enforcing abstract ideals like fairness and order. It wasn't enough to have laws, you needed a neutral mechanism to ensure those laws were applied consistently in practice. The water clock, in its impartial drip, became a symbol of blind justice long before the statue with the scales and sword. This same discipline, so evident in the law courts, found its ultimate expression in the precise, unforgiving world of the Roman military. While a lawyer like Cicero fought against the clock with words, a Roman centurion relied on its steady beat to command his men and secure the empire's frontiers. The army's schedule was unyielding, a cycle of drills, marches, and guard duties that left no room for ambiguity, especially after dark. As night fell over a military camp, the primary method of timekeeping, the sun, vanished, plunging the world into a potential chaos of uncertainty. Yet the security of the camp and the success of its operations depended on a rigid timetable. This is where the water clock transitioned from a tool of civic order to an instrument of military might, becoming as vital to a legion as its javelins and shields. The core of its military function was timing the night watches, the vigiliae. The period from sunset to sunrise was divided into 4 equal watches, each typically lasting about 3 of our modern hours. Ensuring that sentries were relieved precisely at the end of their watch was a matter of life and death. A guard who dozed off, or just as dangerously, a relief that arrived late, could create a fatal gap in the camp's defenses. A simple clepsydrae housed in the Principia or the centurion's quarters provided the objective measure. As the water dripped steadily into its vessel, marking the passage of the watch, the soldier responsible for the clock, likely a designated Aquarius or a junior officer, would know the exact moment to signal the change of guard. This system removed all doubt and prevented disputes. A soldier couldn't argue that his watch felt longer than the last. The water level was an impartial witness. This technological enforcement of the schedule was crucial for morale and discipline, ensuring every man got his fair share of rest and that the camp's perimeter remained secure through the long, dark hours. The military version of the clepsydrae, however, would have been a far cry from the ornate, automated marvels of the city. This was a tool built for the field, prioritizing ruggedness, portability, and simplicity. Think of a compact, heavily built device, perhaps housed in a sturdy wooden case for transport. Its vessels were likely made of thick bronze or lead, materials that could withstand the jostling of a baggage train and the variable conditions of a campaign from the deserts of Syria to the damp forests of Germania. The complex geared displays and automata were unnecessary luxuries here. A simple graduated scale on the side of the collecting vessel was all that was needed. The key was reliability. The regulator valve had to be robust, less prone to fouling from sediment in a hastily dug camp well. This pragmatic design philosophy reflects the Roman army's core strength, its ability to standardize and deploy effective technology across a vast empire, adapting brilliant concepts to the harsh realities of military life. Beyond regulating the night watch, the clepsydrae's precise timing enabled sophisticated tactical operations. Coordinating a night march, for instance, was an incredibly complex maneuver. Different units had to break camp, assemble, and begin their movement in a specific sequence to avoid confusion and congestion at the gates. A water clock allowed commanders to issue orders like, The first cohort will assemble at the beginning of the second watch with the confidence that every centurion understood the exact time referred to. This precision was even more critical for surprise attacks launched before dawn. The success of such an assault depended on perfect synchronization, the main force attacking the enemy's front gate at the very moment a flanking unit scaled the walls at the rear. If one group moved too early, the alarm would be raised. If they moved too late, the main force would be slaughtered. The clepsydrae provided the shared temporal reference that made such complex, high-risk coordination possible. It turned the cover of darkness from a liability into a strategic advantage, allowing the legions to move with a coordinated precision that their adversaries could scarcely comprehend. In this context, the water clock emerges not merely as a timekeeping device, but as a fundamental tool of imperial control. The ability to impose a standardized, objective measure of time upon a legion, whether it was stationed in Britannia or Egypt, was a powerful force for unity and efficiency. It meant that a legionary transferred from one end of the empire to the other would find the same routine, the same discipline, governed by the same steady drip of water. This technological consistency was a key part of the Roman military machine's legendary professionalism. The clepsydrae helped synchronize the vast, distributed mechanism of the Roman army, ensuring that from the sentry standing watch on a lonely wall to the general planning a campaign in his headquarters, everyone was operating on the same schedule. It was this relentless organization, enabled by technologies like the water clock, that allowed a relatively small number of legions to project power over millions of people across 3 continents, making the rhythm of the clepsydrae one of the subtle yet powerful pulses of the Roman Empire itself. While the grand public clocks and military timekeepers demonstrate the clepsydrae's role in state power, this technology also found a place within the private sphere, shaping the rhythm of daily life for the Roman elite. Stepping into the home of a wealthy patrician, we move from the monumental to the personal, where the water clock was less about enforcing public order and more about cultivating a lifestyle of sophisticated control and leisure. For the average Roman citizen, of course, time was a far more informal affair, marked by the sun's position, the crowing of a rooster, or the general bustle of the city. But for the aristocracy, owning a clepsydrae was a powerful statement. It was a symbol of odium, or cultivated leisure, demonstrating that one's time was valuable enough to be measured and managed with precision. A small, often beautifully crafted water clock in the atrium or peristyle garden was more than a utility. It was a status symbol, a tangible piece of cutting-edge technology that separated the refined homeowner from the common masses who lived by the sun alone. The daily routine of a wealthy Roman was a carefully orchestrated series of social rituals, and the domestic clepsydrae served as the conductor. Its gentle, rhythmic drip would help structure the day's most important events. Take the elaborate ritual of the bath, for instance. A visit to the public baths was not a quick in-and-out affair. It was a lengthy social experience involving exercise, various temperature rooms, massage, and conversation. A household clepsydrae allowed a patrician to time his departure to ensure he arrived at the most fashionable hour to see and be seen by his peers. For meals, particularly the lengthy evening banquet known as the cena, the clock could ensure that courses were served with proper pacing and that entertainment, such as a poet's recitation or a musician's performance, did not overstay its welcome. Even the scheduling of visits from clients, a fundamental part of the Roman patronage system, could be managed with its help, ensuring that each visitor received their allotted audience without the schedule descending into chaos. This private timekeeping created a bubble of ordered tranquility within the home, a stark contrast to the unpredictable flow of life outside its walls. These domestic clocks were typically far simpler than their public counterparts. They likely forewent the complex constant level reservoirs and geared displays, operating instead on the simpler outflow principle. Imagine an elegant, self-contained device, perhaps made of finely worked bronze or even silver, shaped like a graceful vase or adorned with mythological figures. Water would trickle from an upper chamber into a lower one, with a scale on the side indicating the passage of the hours. While less accurate over long periods than the public horologia, for the needs of a household, timing a speech practice, a cooking recipe, or the duration of a visit, this was more than sufficient. Their beauty was as important as their function. They were objects of luxuria, designed to impress guests and reflect the owner's taste and wealth. A sundial in the garden was common, but a clepsydra, with its flowing water and aura of mechanical sophistication, spoke of a deeper engagement with the modern world. For those of more modest means, far simpler methods sufficed. The most common alternative was likely the candle clock. This involved using a candle of a known, consistent composition and size, marked at regular intervals. As the candle burned down past each mark, a known amount of time had passed. While susceptible to drafts and variations in wax quality, it was an inexpensive and accessible way to measure durations, especially useful for timing tasks through the night. The very existence of these simpler timers throws the water clock's significance into sharp relief. Choosing a clepsydra over a candle was not just a practical decision, it was a conscious embrace of a more complex, more expensive, and more prestigious technology. It signaled that the homeowner valued precision and possessed the means to acquire a device that required a certain level of maintenance and understanding. In the Roman home, the gentle, almost hypnotic sound of dripping water was not just a measure of minutes and hours, it was the audible signature of a privileged and orderly existence, a quiet testament to the pervasive reach of Roman engineering into the most intimate aspects of life. Beyond the precise measurement of hours for legal battles and military campaigns, the Roman water clock held a deeper, more introspective meaning. For the empire's greatest thinkers, the clepsydra was not merely a machine of civic function, but a profound philosophical object. Its very operation, the relentless, unstoppable trickle of water from a full vessel to an empty one, served as a perfect metaphor for the passage of time and the transient nature of human existence. While a sundial marked the sun's journey, a cyclical and repeating pattern, the water clock presented a linear and finite reality. Once the water flowed out, it could not be put back. The clock had to be reset, but the time itself was gone forever. This quality resonated deeply with Stoic philosophers like Seneca the Younger, who saw in the clepsydra a stark and valuable reminder of life's most pressing truth: our time is limited, and it is constantly slipping away. Seneca's writings, particularly his moral letters to his friend Lucilius, are filled with a sense of urgency about the use of time. He laments how people are extraordinarily frugal with their money but wasteful with their hours, the one resource that, once spent, can never be recovered. In this context, the water clock becomes a powerful symbol of this irreversible expenditure. He famously observed that the clepsydra not only measured the hours assigned to a lawyer's case, but also measured the very lifespan of the person using it. Every drip was a moment of his own life passing, a small death. This was not a morbid fixation, but a practical, stoic call to action. By keeping the image of the clepsydra in mind, one was encouraged to live with purpose and intention, to avoid the trivial and focus on what is truly meaningful. It was a technology that preached a sermon, its silent, steady drip a constant whisper to attend to philosophy, to duty, and to virtue before the vessel of life ran empty. This philosophical dimension was not limited to Seneca. Pliny the Elder, whose monumental natural history sought to catalog all knowledge of the natural world, also saw the water clock as an object of deep significance. For Pliny, a man obsessed with observation and categorization, the clock represented humanity's attempt to impose order on a fundamental, chaotic force of nature. Time, like water, is formless and relentless. By channeling water through engineered pathways and calibrated nozzles, the Romans gave time a shape and a number. This act of measurement was, in a sense, an act of defiance against the formless void, a way to grasp the ungraspable. The clock's ability to function independently of the sun meant that human order could persist even when the natural world was shrouded in darkness, reinforcing the Roman ideal of a rational, structured civilization standing against the chaos of the unknown. The clepsydra, therefore, was a symbol of humanitas, the refinement and intellectual mastery that defined Roman civilization. Connecting this technology to broader Roman thought reveals a cultural preoccupation with fate, order, and the productive use of one's allotted span. The Roman concept of fatum, or fate, was not a passive surrender to destiny, but often involved meeting one's predetermined path with discipline and dignity. The water clock embodied this principle. It represented the fixed, inevitable passage of time, but it also provided the tool to manage that passage wisely within its constraints. Just as a general used the clock to orchestrate a perfectly timed night attack, an individual could use its philosophical lesson to orchestrate a well-lived life. The device perfectly married two core Roman values: disciplina, the strict adherence to order and system, and virtus, the courage and strength to act decisively within that system. It taught that time was a resource to be managed with the same rigor as a military campaign or a legal defense. This philosophical layer transforms our understanding of the clepsydra from a cold piece of engineering into an object rich with human meaning. It was a mirror reflecting the Roman soul, practical yet profound, disciplined yet acutely aware of mortality. In the hushed library of a philosopher, the soft sound of dripping water would have been a more powerful meditation on mortality than any skull on a desk. It connected the most advanced technology of the age to the most timeless questions of human existence. The water clock did not just tell the Romans what hour it was, it reminded them of what it meant to be alive in the brief interval between the filling and the emptying of the vessel. Our journey into the inner workings of the clepsydra now brings us to the single most important voice from the ancient world on the subject, Marcus Vitruvius Pollio. While we have fragments and mentions from other sources, it is in Vitruvius's monumental work, De Architectura, on architecture, that we find a chapter dedicated entirely to the construction of water clocks. This isn't a passing reference, it's a detailed, technical manual for anyone trying to understand the true sophistication of Roman engineering. Vitruvius is our master guide. His writings provide the crucial bridge between admiring these devices from a distance and truly grasping the intellectual ambition required to build them. He doesn't just describe a simple timer, he lays out the blueprint for the most advanced type of water clock of his era, the anaphoric clock. This was far more than a time-telling device, it was a miniature animated model of the cosmos itself. Vitruvius's instructions reveal a device of astonishing complexity. An anaphoric clock combined the steady pulse of hydraulics with a celestial map. Imagine a large, rotating bronze disc behind the clock's main face. This disc, known as the anaphora, was not blank. It was a detailed star chart engraved with the constellations of the zodiac and the paths of the planets. This disc was the heart of the clock's astronomical function. But how did it move? The genius of the design was its connection to the clock's water engine. The same steady flow of water that filled the measuring vessel and raised the float was also used to drive a mechanism that turned this star disk through a series of gears, a technology the Romans perfected. The linear motion of the float was converted into the slow, precise rotation of the anaphora. The disk was designed to make one complete revolution every 24 hours, mirroring the apparent daily rotation of the heavens around the earth. As the disk turned, different constellations would appear to rise and set behind a fixed wire or pointer on the clock's face. This meant that on any given night, an observer could look at the clock and see a representation of which stars should be visible in the actual sky. It was a planetarium powered by water. The practical implications of Vitruvius's text are immense. His step-by-step descriptions are so precise that they have served as a literal recipe for modern historians and engineers. Teams of archaeologists, horologists, and model makers have pored over his Latin text, translating his technical terms and following his geometrical instructions to construct fully functional replicas. These reconstructions are not mere guesses, they are physical proofs of concept. When a modern craftsman builds a working Roman anaphoric clock based solely on Vitruvius's 2,000-year-old words, it proves beyond any doubt that the Romans possessed not only the theoretical knowledge, but also the practical workshop skills to bring such a device to life. These reconstructions have resolved long-standing debates about the feasibility of certain gear ratios and the methods for achieving a 24-hour cycle. They demonstrate that Roman engineers had a sophisticated understanding of astronomical cycles and could translate that understanding into precise mechanical movement. The success of these projects validates Vitruvius as a reliable source and elevates our appreciation of Roman technological capability from impressive speculation to documented fact. What makes the architecture so invaluable is its context. Vitruvius was not writing a theoretical treatise for philosophers, he was creating a practical handbook for fellow architects and engineers. His tone is that of a seasoned professional passing on hard-won knowledge. He explains the importance of choosing the right materials to prevent corrosion, the necessity of calibrating the flow for different seasons, and the geometry required to design the conical measuring vessel that automatically adjusts for the unequal length of seasonal hours. He doesn't just say build a gear, He implies the need for craftsmen who can file the teeth to mesh perfectly, ensuring a smooth transfer of power from the water's force to the disk's majestic turn. This practical focus tells us that these clocks were not one-off marvels built for an emperor's vanity. Vitruvius presents them as part of the standard repertoire of a skilled architect, suggesting that the knowledge to build them was more widespread than we might assume. His work is a window into a world where advanced engineering was a teachable, repeatable discipline. Thanks to Vitruvius's meticulous blueprint, the silent, lost ticking of the Roman water clock can once again be heard, allowing us to stand in awe before a machine that did not just measure hours, but mapped the very heavens. For all the detailed descriptions left by writers like Vitruvius, the physical evidence for Roman water clocks is surprisingly, incredibly scarce. Walking through the ruins of a Roman city, you would see the enduring bones of aqueducts, amphitheaters, and roads, but you would search in vain for a complete clepsydrae standing in a forum. The grand public timekeepers that once governed daily life have almost entirely vanished from the archaeological record. The primary reason for this lies in the very materials they were made from. While the grandest clocks featured bronze components, many more modest public and private versions were constructed from terracotta and wood, materials that simply perish over centuries when exposed to the elements. Furthermore, the most valuable parts of these devices, the bronze gears, pipes, and vessels, were highly susceptible to recycling. In a world where metal was a precious resource, a broken or obsolete water clock was not preserved as a historical artifact. It was seen as a ready supply of raw material to be melted down for coins, weapons, or new statues, its identity lost forever in the smelter's fire. Yet despite these odds, archaeologists have unearthed tantalizing fragments that whisper of this lost technology. At sites like Pompeii, preserved under volcanic ash, and Aquincum, a Roman town in modern-day Hungary, excavations have revealed pieces of pottery vessels with carefully incised markings. These are not mere decoration, they are graduated scales, the hour lines for a simple water clock. Finding one of these shards is like finding a single number from a watch face. It confirms the object's purpose, but leaves the full mechanism to the imagination. These fragments tell us that water clocks were not rare luxuries, but were integrated into the fabric of Roman life, from the bustling Bay of Naples to the distant provinces along the Danube. Their widespread presence is implied by these scattered clues, even if the complete devices elude us. Then there is the discovery that stands in a class of its own, the Salzburg water clock. This remarkable find is the closest we have ever come to seeing a sophisticated Roman clepsydrae in its complete functioning form. It was not discovered in a forum or a wealthy villa, but in a worked-out salt mine near Salzburg, Austria, where it had likely been discarded or stored and then forgotten, spared from the recycling that claimed its counterparts. What makes the Salzburg clock so extraordinary is that it is not a collection of fragments. It is a largely intact assembly of bronze components, a three-dimensional puzzle that reveals the genius of Roman mechanical engineering. The clock's design is that of an anaphoric clock, exactly as described by Vitruvius. It features a complex gear train, a system of interlocking tooth wheels that translated the linear motion of a rising float into the rotational movement of a display. The centerpiece of this mechanism is a delicately crafted bronze disc, a surviving example of the anaphora. This disc is engraved with a map of the constellations, a miniature bronze cosmos. As the gears turned, this disc would have rotated once per day, showing the movement of the stars across the night sky in real time. Holding this ancient gear in your hand, you can see the precision with which each tooth was filed, ensuring a smooth and reliable transfer of power from the water's steady flow to the celestial display. The Salzburg clock transforms the writings of Vitruvius from an abstract description into a tangible, mechanical reality. It provides irrefutable proof that the Romans not only conceived of these astronomical computers, but possessed the metalworking skill to build them with a level of precision that would not be seen again in Europe for nearly 1,000 years. This single salvaged artifact bridges the gap between text and technology, allowing us to understand not just what the Romans wrote about their water clocks, but what their hands were truly capable of creating. Yet the legacy of Roman horology was not confined to the Italian peninsula. Its influence flowed eastward, merging with earlier traditions to create spectacular hybrid structures. A perfect symbol of this technological and cultural exchange is the remarkable Tower of the Winds in Athens. Erected around the middle of the 1st century before the Common Era, this elegant octagonal marble tower stands as a magnificent fusion of Greek scientific thought and Roman engineering ambition. While its construction was funded by a wealthy Greek benefactor and built on Greek soil, the sheer scale and sophistication of its timekeeping functions point directly to the advanced hydraulic principles being perfected in Rome at the very same time. The tower was far more than a beautiful monument. It was a complete public timekeeping station designed to serve the citizens of Athens with unparalleled reliability. Its very existence speaks to a world where knowledge was already circulating freely across the Mediterranean, with Roman practical genius enhancing Greek theoretical foundations. To understand the tower's brilliance, we must first take a virtual tour of its ingenious design. Each of the building's 8 sides corresponds to one of the 8 primary directions from which the wind blows, and each is adorned with a beautifully carved relief figure representing that wind. But the true marvel lies in the integration of its timekeeping systems. On the exterior southern faces, deep lines were cut into the marble, creating a series of sundials. These would have been highly accurate on sunny days, allowing Athenians to read the hour directly from the shadow's position. Yet the architects knew that a sundial alone was insufficient for a major city. The tower's true innovation was housed within its walls, a large, complex water clock, almost certainly of the improved, constant level type that Roman engineers had mastered. This internal hydraulic system transformed the building into an all-weather horological instrument, ensuring that time could be told accurately regardless of clouds, rain, or the darkness of night. The operation of this internal clock would have been a feat of civic engineering. Historians and archaeologists believe the tower was connected to a reliable water source, likely the ancient aqueduct that brought water from the nearby hills to the agora below. This steady supply would have fed a constant level reservoir, probably located on an upper floor or in the tower's loft, using the same overflow principle we explored earlier to maintain unwavering water pressure. From this reservoir, water would have been channeled through a carefully calibrated bronze nozzle, beginning its measured journey into a large receiving vessel on the ground floor. The scale on this vessel would have been calibrated for the unequal seasonal hours, possibly using a specially shaped container to automatically account for the changing length of daylight throughout the year. The most compelling hypothesis suggests that the time indicated by this internal water clock was then displayed to the public on the exterior of the building. Imagine a mechanical pointer driven by a float and gear system inside the tower that projected through the wall to move across a large public dial face. A citizen could therefore approach the Tower of the Winds at any hour, day or night, and see the official time without ever needing to step inside. This seamless integration of technologies is what makes the tower such a powerful example of a Greek-Roman hybrid. The underlying concept of the clepsydrae was of course Greek in origin, but the application here, the monumental scale, the likely use of a constant level system for long-term accuracy, and the potential for a public mechanical display bears the unmistakable hallmark of Roman engineering pragmatism. The Greeks provided the deep astronomical understanding and the architectural elegance. The Romans contributed the hydraulic know-how to make it a robust and reliable piece of urban infrastructure. The Tower of the Winds was not an isolated Greek project. It was a product of its era, a time when the Roman world was expanding eastward, bringing with it new techniques and a characteristically systematic approach to solving civic problems. It stands as a silent testament to a collaborative moment in history, where two great civilizations combined their strengths to master the flow of time itself, creating a landmark that informed and awed the citizens of Athens for generations. But how can we be truly certain that these intricate mechanisms, described so elegantly by Vitruvius, were more than just theoretical concepts or fanciful exaggerations? The answer lies not in ancient ruins, but in modern workshops where unique collaboration between historians, horologists, and engineers has brought these silent giants back to life. By treating Vitruvius's text as a literal engineering blueprint, teams around the world have embarked on ambitious projects to construct full-scale, fully functional replicas of Roman water clocks. These are not mere models for display, they are working machines built to be tested, measured, and understood. The process of reconstruction is itself a fascinating archaeological experiment, a journey of discovery that often reveals as much about Roman problem solving as it does about their timekeeping. The first and greatest challenge is interpreting Vitruvius's sometimes cryptic Latin descriptions. Terms for specific components like the gear train or the float mechanism must be carefully translated, not just linguistically but mechanically. What exactly did he mean by a certain phrase? Does this measurement refer to the internal diameter or the external one? Historians pore over the text while engineers analyze the physics, and together they debate the most plausible configurations. Then comes the fabrication, a discipline in itself, using materials and techniques as close as possible to those available to Roman craftsmen. Bronze casting, hand filing of gear teeth, stone masonry artisans build each component. This hands-on work frequently uncovers unexpected hurdles. A gear ratio that looks perfect on paper might cause the mechanism to bind when built in bronze. The flow rate from a hand-drilled nozzle might be inconsistent. Each of these problems forces the modern builders to think like Roman engineers, troubleshooting and iterating on the design just as an ancient workshop would have done. It is through this frustrating yet illuminating process of trial and error that the true genius of the original designers comes into sharp focus. One of the most celebrated examples of this reconstructive archaeology is the magnificent anaphoric water clock at the Musée du Temps in Besançon, France, a city with a deep history of watchmaking. This replica is a masterpiece of interpretation and craftsmanship. Visitors can witness the entire process in motion: the steady trickle of water, the graceful rise of the float, the slow, deliberate turn of the bronze star disc, and the synchronized sweep of the pointer across the dial. Seeing this clock in action is a transformative experience. The soft sound of dripping water and the gentle whir of ancient gears create a tangible connection to the past, transforming abstract descriptions into a living, breathing machine. But beyond the spectacle, these working models have provided invaluable scientific data. By running the clocks for extended periods and comparing their time against modern precision instruments, researchers have been able to quantify their accuracy. The results are both impressive and revealing. A well-tuned Roman water clock with a skilled attendant managing its regulator and water quality could easily achieve an accuracy of within 15 to 20 minutes over a 24-hour period. In the context of the ancient world, this was an extraordinary feat of precision, more than sufficient for scheduling legal cases, military watches, or public events. However, the replicas have also clearly demonstrated the technology's limitations. Their accuracy is highly dependent on constant maintenance. Even a slight buildup of sediment in the nozzle or a change in water temperature will gradually introduce error, meaning the clock would need regular recalibration against a sundial to stay truly accurate over many days. This doesn't diminish the Roman achievement. Rather, it highlights the sophisticated partnership between machine and human operator that was required for it to succeed. These modern reconstructions have ultimately taught us that the Roman water clock was not infallible, but it was wonderfully, brilliantly adequate. It was a solution perfectly calibrated to the needs of its time, a testament to a civilization that could look at a flowing stream and see in its current the potential to measure, master, and bring order to the world. After marveling at the engineering and philosophy behind these devices, it is only fair to ask the critical question: just how accurate were they? The honest answer is that a Roman water clock was no match for the quartz crystal oscillator in your smartphone or the atomic clock that synchronizes our digital world. By our modern standards, they were inherently imprecise instruments, susceptible to a host of environmental variables that even the most skilled Roman engineer could not fully eliminate. The first and most significant of these was water temperature. On a cold morning, water becomes more viscous, flowing more sluggishly through the timing nozzle. On a hot afternoon, it thins out and flows more freely. This meant that a clock calibrated for a pleasant spring day would gradually run slower as winter set in, and faster during a summer heat wave, potentially gaining or losing a noticeable amount of time over a single 24-hour cycle. Then there was the ever-present problem of mineral buildup. The water from Roman aqueducts, while a marvel of public works, was far from pure. It carried dissolved minerals like calcium and lime. Over days and weeks, these minerals would precipitate out, forming a thin, almost invisible crust inside the pipes and, most critically, on the edges of the carefully crafted outlet nozzle. This microscopic scaling was enough to subtly constrict the aperture, slowing the flow and causing the clock to lose time with a creeping, insidious inaccuracy that was difficult to detect until the error had become substantial. Even changes in air pressure could introduce tiny fluctuations in the flow rate, a level of sensitivity the Romans would not have understood. All of this meant that without constant vigilance and recalibration, a water clock's error could easily compound to 15, 30, or even 60 minutes over the course of a day. The human element was just as critical. The clock's accuracy was profoundly dependent on the diligence and skill of its attendant. This individual had to be more than a mere custodian. They were a combination of mechanic, hydrologist, and astronomer. Their day began with cleaning, meticulously scrubbing the vessels and pipes to remove any silt or algae from the previous day. They had to ensure the constant level reservoir was functioning correctly, watching the overflow channel to confirm the water level remained perfectly steady. They needed an intuitive feel for the machine, an ability to listen to the rhythm of the drips and sense when something was amiss. Most importantly, they were responsible for the daily recalibration. At some point, likely around midday, the attendant would compare the water clock's reading against the only truly reliable time standard available, a properly aligned sundial. If the clepsydra said it was the 8th hour, but the sundial showed the sun had not yet reached that position, the attendant would have to make an adjustment. This might involve slightly opening or closing the moderator valve, or, in a more drastic correction, adding or removing a small amount of water from the measuring vessel to bring the pointer back into alignment with the solar time. This process highlights that the water clock was not an autonomous timekeeper, but a slave to the sun, requiring daily correction to maintain its credibility. Its true function was to extend the authority of solar time into the night and during cloudy weather, not to replace it. However, to judge these devices by their shortcomings is to miss the point entirely. The true measure of their success lies not in minutes gained or lost, but in whether they were fit for purpose within their own society, and for the demands of ancient Roman life, they were not just adequate, they were revolutionary. Consider the context. What was the need for timekeeping in the 1st century? A Roman senator did not need to catch a train departing at 8:42 in the morning. A centurion did not need to synchronize a watch for an attack at 0600 hours. The fundamental unit of Roman public time was the hour, a block of 45 to 75 of our modern minutes. Appointments were set for the 2nd hour or after the 5th hour. Public baths opened at a generally understood time. The law courts began their sessions in the morning. For organizing this rhythm of life, an accuracy within a quarter or even half an hour was perfectly sufficient. The primary function of the public clepsydra was to create a shared, objective reference point that everyone in the community could use. Its greatest achievement was replacing subjective, personal time. I'll meet you when the sun is over that tree. With a civic standard, it brought order and predictability to public affairs. A lawyer pleading his case was not worried about losing 30 seconds. He was allocated a certain number of ampuli, or measured units of water. The clock ensured his opponent received the same measure. For the military, the night watch was divided into 4 long vigils. The water clock ensured that each sentry stood guard for an equal portion of the night, and that the change of watch happened at a predictable time, not when a sleepy officer guessed it might be midnight. This reliability, this impartiality, was worth far more than perfect precision. So while we can acknowledge that a Roman water clock was a leaky, temperamental, and demanding machine, we must also recognize it as a triumphant solution to the problems of its age. It was a technology that met the societal need for order and coordination with remarkable elegance. Its limitations were simply part of the technological landscape, accepted in the same way we accept that our GPS might lose signal in a tunnel or that a battery will eventually die. The Romans built a system that worked with the materials and knowledge they had, and in doing so, they tamed the flow of time for centuries, laying the foundational ideas that would eventually lead to the mechanical clocks of the Middle Ages and the precise timekeeping we enjoy today. Their success was not in building a perfect clock, but in building a clock that was perfect for its purpose. Yet the fall of the Western Roman Empire in the 5th century did not mean the end of the clepsydra story. Like a river diverted but not dammed, the flow of this technological knowledge continued, finding new channels through which to advance. The first and most direct inheritors were the Eastern Romans, the Byzantine Empire, which preserved and maintained the great public works of antiquity, including the monumental timekeeping systems. In the sprawling capital of Constantinople, the rhythm of civic life continued to be measured by the steady drip of water clocks within the imperial bureaucracy and the great basilicas. Byzantine scholars meticulously copied and preserved ancient texts, including the works of engineers like Vitruvius, ensuring that the blueprints for this sophisticated technology were not lost to the upheavals of the early Middle Ages in Europe. It was through these Byzantine repositories, as well as through direct cultural and trade contacts, that the torch of horological innovation was passed eastward, where it would be embraced and spectacularly refined during the Golden Age of Islam. Islamic engineers of the 8th to the 13th centuries did not merely preserve Roman technology, they transformed it into something entirely new, pushing the boundaries of mechanics and artistry to heights the Romans themselves might have found astonishing. Scholars in cities like Baghdad, Damascus, and Cairo absorbed the knowledge from Greek and Roman texts, which were translated into Arabic in a vast empire-wide effort known as the translation movement. But they were not content with simply replicating the past. They saw in the water clock a canvas for both scientific precision and breathtaking spectacle. Their improvements were profound. They developed more sophisticated regulator mechanisms, using complex conical valves to achieve even greater control over the flow rate. They incorporated intricate gear trains, not just for displaying the time, but for powering elaborate sequences of automata that far surpassed the singing birds and bell-striking soldiers of the Roman world. These were not just timekeepers, they were kinetic sculptures designed to inspire wonder and demonstrate the intellectual and technological supremacy of the Islamic world. The pinnacle of this achievement is captured in the work of one man, Ismail al-Jazari, a 12th century engineer and inventor who served the Artukid dynasty in Diyarbakir. In his magnificent book, The Book of Knowledge of Ingenious Mechanical Devices, written in 1206, al-Jazari described in exquisite detail the construction of several water clocks, including his masterpiece, the elephant clock. This device was a marvel of intercultural engineering and symbolic art. A large automaton of an elephant carried a howdah on its back, which housed a complex water clock mechanism. Every half hour, a series of automated events would unfold. A figure in the howdah would lower a pen, a bird would chirp, a dragon would swing its head, and the elephant driver would tap a cymbal. The entire mechanism was driven by a water-filled basin hidden inside the elephant, which used a sophisticated float and siphon system to trigger the sequence with remarkable regularity. The elephant clock was more than a timepiece, it was a representation of the known world, incorporating Chinese dragons, an Indian elephant, an Egyptian phoenix, and Arabian figures, all powered by Greek and Roman hydraulic principles perfected by Islamic ingenuity. Al-Jazari's work represents the absolute zenith of the water clock as a form, a technology that had evolved from a utilitarian Roman instrument into a global symbol of knowledge and power. This advanced Islamic horology did not remain isolated. Through the porous borders of Spain, Sicily, and the Crusader states, these ideas began to trickle back into a Europe that was slowly reawakening to science and technology. Medieval European scholars traveling to Islamic centers of learning encountered these incredible devices and brought back descriptions and, crucially, the underlying mechanical principles. The most significant of these was the verge escapement, a mechanism that controls the release of energy in a clock. While the Romans used a continuous flow of water, Islamic engineers were experimenting with systems that used intermittent flows and geared weights, which are the direct ancestors of the mechanical escapement. The knowledge of complex gear trains, weight drives, and automated displays, all refined in the Islamic world, provided the essential building blocks for European clockmakers. When the first great mechanical clocks began to appear in the steeples of European cathedrals in the 13th and 14th centuries, like the one in Salisbury Cathedral, they were not a sudden, miraculous invention. They were the culmination of a centuries-long process of technological transmission, a debt owed to the Islamic engineers who had kept the flame of ancient horology burning brightly and then added their own revolutionary fuel. The steady tick-tock of the mechanical clock, which would come to define the rhythm of Western life, has its ultimate origins in the silent, relentless drip of the Roman clepsydrae. This unbroken chain of innovation, from the forums of Rome to the libraries of Baghdad and finally to the cathedrals of Europe, solidifies the water clock's role not as a technological dead end, but as the vital bridge between the timekeeping of the ancient world and the mechanical revolution that would shape the modern era. To truly appreciate the revolutionary nature of the Roman water clock, we have to place it in the context of the other timekeeping options available to an ancient citizen. While the clepsydrae was a marvel of engineering, it wasn't the only game in town. Each method had its own strengths and profound weaknesses, and by comparing them, the clepsydrae's unique value comes into sharp focus, revealing exactly why it became the backbone of official Roman time. The most common and accessible timekeeper was without a doubt the sundial. This was a technology the Romans had adopted and spread throughout their empire, placing these stone sentinels in every forum and public space. In many ways, the sundial was the perfect timepiece. It was free to operate, requiring no maintenance beyond an occasional cleaning, and it was directly tied to the cosmic motion of the sun, making it the ultimate astronomical reference. But its flaws were crippling for a society that needed to function around the clock. The most obvious limitation was its complete uselessness at night. Once the sun set, the sundial became a dark, silent slab of stone, offering no guidance. It was equally helpless on cloudy or rainy days when shadows were too faint to read. Furthermore, a sundial had to be perfectly aligned to the local latitude and compass direction to be accurate. A dial moved just a few miles from its original location could be off by a significant margin. While excellent for giving a rough idea of the time on a sunny afternoon, the sundial was entirely inadequate for the precise scheduling of legal proceedings that stretched into the evening, or for coordinating the night watches of a military camp. It was a fair weather friend, reliable only under ideal conditions. For measuring shorter, specific intervals, the Romans and other ancient cultures often turned to the hourglass or its predecessor, the water-filled version known as a clepsydra. These were brilliantly simple devices. A fixed amount of sand or water trickled through a narrow opening from one glass or ceramic bulb into another. Their great advantage was portability and independence from sunlight. A lawyer could use one to time a short speech, or a cook could use it to ensure a dish wasn't overdone. But this simplicity came at a great cost: duration. An hourglass was typically designed to measure a single short period, perhaps 15 minutes or half an hour. Once the sand had run out, the device had to be physically inverted by a person to start again, making it useless for continuous, unattended timekeeping over many hours. It couldn't tell you what hour of the day it was. It could only tell you that a specific predetermined interval had elapsed. For timing a 4-hour night watch or tracking the 12 hours of daylight without constant human intervention, the hourglass was a hopeless tool. It was a timer, not a clock. Then there were more personal, household methods like the candle clock. This involved using a candle of a known, consistent size and composition, marked at regular intervals. As the candle burned down past each mark, a known amount of time had passed. This method had the advantage of working indoors and at night, and it was inexpensive. But its inaccuracy was legendary. Any draft in the room could make the candle burn faster. Variations in the wax quality or the thickness of the wick would alter the burn rate. Most dangerously, it was a significant fire risk, especially in a Roman home filled with wooden furniture, textiles, and flammable building materials. Leaving a candle clock burning unattended overnight to mark the watches was an invitation to disaster. Like the hourglass, it was better suited for measuring durations than for displaying the time of day, and its inherent lack of precision made it unsuitable for any serious civic or military application. Against this backdrop of limited alternatives, the clepsydrae's advantages shine brightly. It occupied a unique and powerful middle ground. Unlike the sundial, it was completely independent of weather and daylight, functioning with unwavering consistency through the darkest night and the stormiest afternoon. Unlike the hourglass, it was designed for continuous operation, capable of running for 24 hours or more without needing to be reset, thanks to ingenious features like the automatic siphon reset mechanism. And unlike the candle clock, it offered a level of reliability and safety that the open flame could never hope to match. Its flowing water posed no fire hazard, and its accuracy, while requiring skilled maintenance, was far superior to the unpredictable burn of a candle. This specific combination of qualities, continuous, all-weather operation and reliable precision, is exactly why the water clock became the technology of choice for the most critical functions of the Roman state. In the law courts, where fairness depended on allocating equal, uninterrupted speaking time to both sides, only the clepsydra could serve as an impartial referee. In the military camps, where the security of the empire depended on the punctual change of night guards, only the clepsydra could provide a trusted, objective measure through the long, dark hours. For the complex scheduling of public events and the synchronization of a vast, sprawling administration, the clepsydra offered a common, dependable standard. The sundial was the people's clock, the candle was the household's timer, but the water clock was the empire's clock. It was the instrument that brought the discipline of measured time to the heart of Roman power, proving that true reliability was worth the engineering effort. But perhaps the most profound impact of the water clock was its role as a silent engine of imperial unity. Think about the sheer scale of the Roman Empire at its height, stretching from the rain-swept highlands of northern Britain to the sun-baked markets of Syrian Damascus. This was a vast mosaic of different peoples, languages, and ancient traditions, each with their own local way of marking time, by the sun's height, by the crowing of a rooster, or by the informal rhythms of village life. Imposing a single standardized Roman time across this sprawling domain was not just a technical achievement, it was a powerful act of cultural and administrative unification. The clepsydra became a physical symbol of Rome's overarching authority, a tangible presence in provincial forums and military forts that said, in effect, "You are now operating on Rome's schedule." This standardization was the bedrock of imperial efficiency. A decree issued by the emperor in Rome could specify a deadline for tax collection in a distant province, and thanks to the shared reference of the water clock, officials thousands of miles apart had a common understanding of when that deadline would arrive. Merchants transporting goods from Egypt to Gaul could coordinate their shipments and market arrivals with a reliability that was previously unimaginable, because the opening of the markets in Alexandria and Lugdunum were now synchronized to the same objective measure. This created a seamless web of commerce and communication, binding the disparate parts of the empire into a single, functioning economic unit. This imposition of temporal order was a subtle but incredibly effective form of social control. For a newly conquered territory, the arrival of Roman rule was marked by visible symbols like new roads, aqueducts, and legions, but the installation of a public water clock was an equally potent, if less dramatic, declaration of a new world order. It replaced the flexible, nature-based time of the local population with the rigid, mathematically precise time of the conqueror. The daily life of a citizen in, say, Carthage or Athens was gradually recalibrated to the Roman rhythm. The law courts now convened and adjourned at hours determined by the clepsydra. Public announcements were made at specific times posted on the clock. Even the scheduling of religious festivals and public games was brought into this new temporal framework. This constant daily reinforcement of Roman time discipline served to acculturate provincial populations, teaching them to internalize the values of order, punctuality, and bureaucratic predictability that were central to the Roman identity. It was a way of making people think and act like Romans, not through force but through the steady, inescapable drip of water. The clock's authority was presented as neutral and scientific, which made its power all the more persuasive. There was no arguing with the water level in the vessel. It was an objective fact that everyone could see, making the Roman system seem inherently fair and logical. The clepsydra's role in military logistics alone was a force multiplier for Roman power. Coordinating the movements of legions and supply trains across continents required a temporal precision that sundials and candle clocks could never provide. Consider the challenge of supplying a campaign on the German frontier. Grain ships from North Africa had to arrive at Ostia, the port of Rome, on a schedule that allowed for the overland transport of supplies northward to meet the army before the winter snows made the Alpine passes impassable. A delay of a few weeks at any point in this chain could mean starvation for thousands of soldiers. The water clock provided the synchronized heartbeat that kept this vast, distributed operation running smoothly. A commander in Germania could send orders with the instruction, "The reinforcements will march from the base on the morning of the Kalends," confident that his counterpart hundreds of miles away understood the exact moment to set out. This logistical symphony, conducted by the clepsydra, allowed Rome to project military force over incredible distances with a speed and coordination that their adversaries could not match. The ability to have multiple armies converge on a single target from different directions at a predetermined time was a tactical advantage born directly from this shared timekeeping. In this sense, the water clock was as crucial to the expansion and maintenance of the empire as the gladius or the pilum. It was the tool that managed the empire's rhythm, ensuring that its immense resources could be brought to bear with maximum effect anywhere they were needed. The relentless, orderly ticking of the clepsydra was in a very real way the sound of the Roman Empire itself, a steady, disciplined pulse that resonated from the heart of the Forum to the farthest reaches of the known world, synchronizing millions of people under a single, enduring banner of order. While the Roman water clock stands as a testament to incredible ingenuity, its story is often clouded by modern misconceptions that can distort our appreciation of what it truly was. Let's clear the air by tackling a few of the most persistent myths head-on, because understanding what these devices were not is just as important as celebrating what they were. A particularly vivid and common image is that of a massive clepsydra timing the life and death struggles within the gladiatorial arena, its final drop signaling a thumbs up or thumbs down from the crowd. However, this dramatic scene is almost certainly a fiction. Gladiator games were daytime spectacles held in open-air amphitheaters like the Colosseum, which were perfectly equipped with numerous sundials. The sun itself provided a free, highly visible, and perfectly adequate clock for timing the bouts and the intervals between them. Using a complex, maintenance-heavy water clock for this purpose would have been entirely unnecessary. The logistical challenge of placing a water-fed device high enough for tens of thousands of spectators to see and keeping it filled and functional makes little sense when a simple shadow on a marked stone would do the job perfectly well. This misconception likely stems from our own projection of modern sporting events, where digital countdown clocks are essential, onto a past that had a much more relaxed and natural relationship with time. Another popular belief is that Roman water clocks were incredibly precise, perhaps even accurate to the minute or second. This idea imposes a 21st century standard of precision onto a first century technology. As we've explored, these clocks were marvels of their age, but they were battling fundamental physical challenges. Changes in water temperature, mineral buildup in the nozzles, and variations in air pressure meant that even the best maintained clepsydra would gradually drift. Their true achievement was consistency over shorter periods, not absolute precision over a full day. The goal was not to know that it was exactly 12 minutes past the 8th hour, but to know reliably that the 8th hour had begun. The societal need was for coordinating events in blocks of time, the duration of a legal speech, the length of a night watch, not for the split-second synchronization we require today. Judging them by a standard of seconds per day accuracy misses the point. Their success was in providing a shared objective reference that was good enough for the complex needs of Roman society, replacing subjective guesses with a governed, measurable flow. We must also be careful not to imagine a giant, ornate water clock in every Roman town square. Much like a medieval cathedral clock, the reality was far more varied and pragmatic. Grand public horologia, like the possible complex attached to the Horologium of Augustus, were monumental statements of imperial power and wealth, found only in the most important cities like Rome, Alexandria, or Antioch. For a small provincial town or a military outpost, the timekeeping infrastructure would have been much humbler. A simple sundial would have sufficed for most daily business. A clepsydra in such a setting would likely have been a more functional, portable device, perhaps housed within the headquarters of a military camp or the hall of a local magistrate for specific official duties like timing legal proceedings or military watches. It wouldn't have been a public spectacle for the entire town to set their day by. The widespread popularity of water clocks is true in the sense that the technology was known and used across the empire, but its manifestation ranged from breathtaking astronomical displays in capital cities to simple, utilitarian timers in administrative buildings. Appreciating this spectrum helps us see the technology as an integrated, practical tool, not a universal piece of civic art. Debunking these myths is not an exercise in diminishing Roman genius, quite the opposite. It allows us to appreciate their achievements with a more honest and therefore more profound respect. By understanding that they didn't use water clocks for gladiator fights, we can focus on their real revolutionary application in law courts and military camps. By accepting that they weren't accurate to the second, we can marvel at the sophisticated engineering, the constant level reservoirs, the shaped vessels for seasonal hours that allowed them to achieve the remarkable consistency they did. And by recognizing that not every town had a monumental clock, we can better understand how this technology was deployed as a practical solution to specific problems of administration and control. Freeing the Roman water clock from the burden of our modern fantasies allows it to shine for what it truly was, a brilliantly pragmatic, appropriately scaled, and utterly foundational piece of technology that helped a vast empire run on a single, disciplined rhythm. Our story begins not with the sun, but in the profound darkness that precedes it. In the silent, chilly hours just before dawn, while most of Rome sleeps, the clepsydrae is already hard at work within the stone walls of a military garrison on the city's outskirts. The night watch, the final vigilia of the night, is drawing to a close. A legionary, his breath misting in the air, stands guard, his eyes scanning the blackness beyond the palisade. Inside the Principia, the camp's headquarters, the only sound is the soft, metronomic plink. Plink, plink of water falling into the bronze receiving vessel of the camp's clepsydra. The float has been rising steadily for hours, and now it nears the fourth mark on the scale. The soldier tasked with monitoring the clock, a junior officer, sees the water level touch the line. He doesn't need to guess the time, the machine declares it. He steps outside and gives a low, clear whistle. In response, the stillness of the camp is broken by the quiet, coordinated sounds of the changing guard, the soft tread of boots on damp earth, the muted clink of armor, and the hushed exchange of passwords. The clepsydra has ensured that each man stood his fair share of the long, dark night, and that the camp's security never wavered. Its impartial drip has orchestrated this vital transition with a reliability no sleepy centurion could match, proving that even in the deepest night, Roman discipline, guided by technology, never slept. As the first hints of gray lighten the sky over the 7 hills, the clock's purpose begins to shift. The military camp stirs to life, but the clepsydra's day is just beginning. It is cleaned, refilled, and its regulator valve is carefully adjusted by its attendant, often a slave with specialized training, who consults a wax tablet noting the correct setting for the season. The scale for the month is securely placed inside the measuring vessel. This daily ritual of preparation is as crucial as the clock's engineering. Without this human dedication, the finest mechanism would soon falter. By the time the sun crests the horizon, the device is ready for its most public and dramatic role, the law courts. The clepsydra is transported to the Forum Romanum, the bustling heart of the city, and placed in a position of honor within a basilica. Here it is no longer a simple timekeeper, it is an instrument of justice. As the praetor takes his seat and the crowd gathers, the atmosphere crackles with anticipation. The first advocate, a well-known senator, rises to speak. With a solemn nod from the judge, the court clerk gives the command, a plug is removed, and the water begins its fateful flow. The lawyer's voice rings out, but his eyes keep flicking towards the clepsydra. His entire case, weeks of preparation, must be compressed into the allotted measure of water. Every elegant phrase, every piercing question is weighed against the relentless drip. This is where the clock's fairness is tested. When his opponent rises to object, the flow is instantly halted. The water waits, it measures only speech, ensuring that procedural wrangling does not steal a moment from the precious time granted by the court. In this hall, the clepsydra is the ultimate arbiter, its neutral flow a stark contrast to the heated passions of the people it governs. When the sun is at its zenith and the courts adjourn for the midday rest, the clock's work for the state is done, but its day is far from over. For a wealthy patrician, the afternoon and evening are a carefully curated sequence of leisure, and the clepsydra is the silent conductor of this domestic symphony. In the spacious atrium of a luxurious home on the Palatine Hill, a smaller, more ornate version of the public clock stands as a testament to the owner's refinement. Its gentle dripping provides a soothing backdrop to the day's rituals. The master of the house uses it to time his departure for the baths, ensuring he arrives at the most fashionable hour. Later, as guests arrive for the evening scena, the grand banquet, the clock ensures the event unfolds with perfect pacing. The first course of eggs, olives, and shellfish is served as the water reaches a certain level. The clock then dictates the transition to the main course of roasted meats and finally, the arrival of the dessert of fruits and nuts, even the evening's entertainment, a recitation of poetry or the performance of a musician, is granted a specific measure of water, ensuring the amusement delights without overstaying its welcome. Here, the clepsydrae is not about fairness or survival, but about the cultivated management of pleasure. It allows its owner to demonstrate control not just over his household, but over time itself, transforming the fleeting hours of the day into a seamless, elegant experience. As night falls once more, the great public sundials are again mere shadows, but the city's heartbeat, measured by water, continues. In the halls of the powerful, political negotiations might stretch into the night, their progress timed by the clepsydrae's unwavering rhythm. In the libraries of philosophers, the sound of dripping water accompanies discussions of fate and mortality, the device itself a tangible reminder of the time slipping through their fingers. And finally, as the last embers of the evening die down, the clepsydrae completes a cycle. In the military camp, it begins its nightly vigil anew. In the wealthy home, its attendant carefully drains it, protecting its delicate components from the frost of a Roman night, readying it for the same cycle to begin again at dawn. From the sentry on the wall to the senator in the forum to the host at his banquet, the clepsydrae was the invisible thread that wove together the tapestry of Roman life. It was a technology that proved time was not a mystery dictated solely by the gods, but a resource that could be measured, managed, and mastered. By following a single clock through a single day, we see it not as a cold, inanimate object, but as a dynamic participant in the civilization that created it, a steady hydraulic pulse echoing through the centuries. The Roman water clock was far more than a simple timer. It was a profound symbol of the Roman worldview, a physical embodiment of their relentless drive to impose order, discipline, and human rationality onto the natural world. Every component, from the constant level reservoir that defied the slowing drip of a simple vessel to the shaped container that automatically corrected for the seasons, speaks of a civilization that refused to accept the chaos of an unmeasured existence. This was not a technology created in isolation. It was the vital, ticking heart of an imperial system. In the law courts, its impartial flow guaranteed a fair hearing. In military camps, its steady rhythm ensured security through the darkest nights. In public squares, it offered a shared, objective truth that unified a sprawling, diverse empire under a single, disciplined schedule. The clepsydrae was a tool of control, but also a tool of civilization, enabling a complexity of coordination that would have been impossible under the rule of the sun alone. And its story does not end with the fall of Rome. The legacy of this hydraulic genius flowed like water through time itself, finding new channels and new forms. The knowledge preserved by Byzantine scholars and eagerly adopted by Islamic engineers blossomed into even more spectacular creations, like Al-Jazari's magnificent elephant clock, which transformed timekeeping into a theatrical art. The intricate gear trains and mechanical principles refined in the workshops of Baghdad and Damascus eventually trickled back into medieval Europe, providing the essential building blocks for the first great mechanical clocks that would come to dominate European steeples. The steady tick-tock of a pendulum clock is a direct descendant of the silent, relentless drip of the Roman clepsydrae. This unbroken chain of innovation, stretching over a millennium, solidifies the water clock's role not as a forgotten curiosity, but as the indispensable bridge between the shadow-based time of antiquity and the gear-driven precision of the modern world. It was the crucial first step in humanity's long journey to capture and quantify time itself, so the next time you unconsciously glance at your phone or your watch for the time, take a moment to remember the sophisticated ingenuity that started it all. That simple act of checking the hour connects you directly to the engineers of ancient Rome, who looked at a flowing stream and saw not just water, but the potential to measure, to manage, and to master one of life's most fundamental forces. They were the original time thieves, the clepsydrae, and their legacy is etched into every second of our synchronized lives. We are curious to know what aspect of Roman engineering fascinates you the most. Is it the enduring strength of their concrete, the breathtaking span of their aqueducts, or the quiet genius of devices like the water clock? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the mechanics of the ancient world, be sure to subscribe for more explorations and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. Thank you for watching.